Picture this for a second. You're stuck underground in a space so tight you can barely fill your lungs with air. Your ribs are pressed hard against the rock, you can't move forward or backward, and panic starts creeping in. That's exactly what happened to 3 explorers. And honestly, the way they got trapped is one of the strangest I've ever come across in the history of underground exploration. Today we're going to dive into this story, figure out how it all went down, and most importantly, how it ended. The spot known as Cool Caves isn't really a cave at all. It's an old abandoned mine tucked away in Mardick Township, Pennsylvania. Unlike natural caves carved out over millions of years, this place was created by human hands. Back in the 1800s, the Mardick area and the banks of the Pequea Creek had plenty of small iron and ore mines running. Today, what's left are forgotten tunnels, stone ruins hidden in the brush, and stories that mix industrial history with a hint of mystery. If you wander around the area, you can still spot signs of the old operations like stone walls, ramps, and sealed entrances. The problem is that none of those openings were built to last. Many are unstable, with tight passages, hidden shafts, and even bad air. That makes exploring them risky business, even for experienced adventurers. The name Cool Caves stuck as a kind of local nickname, but in reality, it's just another leftover mine abandoned after the work dried up, carrying both the memory of old mining days and the dangers of going where you probably shouldn't. Because the name is misleading, it ends up drawing in curious hikers and thrill seekers who think they're walking into some natural cave system. But abandoned mines bring a whole different set of dangers. A lot of those 19th century mines weren't built with safety or long-term stability in mind. On June 11th, 3 guys between 18 and 20 years old were hiking in the area when they stumbled on the entrance to Cool Caves. It didn't look very welcoming. The opening was shaped like a keyhole in the hillside, where you had to squeeze through a narrow gap before dropping into the main corridor of the mine. The whole thing looked like a key sliding into a lock. First, you had to crawl through a tight horizontal section, then drop down into a vertical shaft that connected to the bigger tunnel. In a way, the entrance was its own warning. If you couldn't fit through there, you had no business going deeper. But for those 3, young and in good shape, it felt more like a fun challenge than any real danger. And if you've been following this channel for a while, you already know this isn't that unusual. Though honestly, I can't really understand what goes through people's minds in situations like this. They went in one at a time. The first guy made it through the tight gap without too much trouble and dropped into the main corridor. The second, who was stockier, had to squeeze his shoulders and chest hard against the rock, but eventually managed to get through. The third followed right after with little difficulty. Once inside, the tunnel opened up a bit. You could still see marks on the walls from the old mining equipment, and while they had to walk hunched over, it was manageable. At that point, it felt like the toughest part was behind them. They lined up and kept moving deeper into the abandoned mine. They went about 150 feet in, following the twists and turns left behind by miners decades earlier. That's when they ran into the real danger of Cool Caves, a section where the tunnel suddenly narrowed into a passage shaped like a hexagon. This wasn't a gradual squeeze like you might see in a natural cave. It was abrupt, and the shape looked like something out of geometry class, with 6 sharp sides forming harsh angles. To the eye, it looked like just another obstacle. But that odd shape hid a trap that wasn't obvious until you were inside. The first one managed to push through, twisting and turning his body to fit along the sharp angles. Being the smallest of the 3, he came out the other side exhausted but relieved, and called back that it was tight but doable. The second guy, the biggest of the group, moved in much more carefully. The hexagonal walls pressed against him in strange ways. At first, he made a bit of progress, though it was anything but comfortable. But halfway through, things turned into a nightmare. His body got wedged. His chest, the broadest part of him, jammed tightly between the stone walls. The shape of the passage created pressure points on different parts of his torso, locking him in completely. There was no way forward because the tunnel pinched even tighter, and no way backward because the angles dug into his ribs and clothes, holding him fast. On the other side, the first friend realized something was wrong. He tried to come back to help, but the space was so narrow, there wasn't enough room for both of them at once. Things got worse when he tried to inch back toward the hexagonal squeeze. His stuck friend's body filled the entire space, blocking it completely. He couldn't reach him to pull, and there was no way to get enough leverage in that cramped geometry. The only thing he could do was try to keep the trapped friend calm while they both racked their brains for a solution. But the narrow tunnel made it impossible to actually grab him or create any wiggle room. He was also trapped himself, stuck on the far side with no way to retreat. Thankfully, the third friend was still in the main tunnel before the hexagonal squeeze and could move around freely. Seeing how bad things were, he made the critical decision to go for help. He crawled back through the mine passage, squeezed out of the keyhole-shaped entrance, and immediately called emergency services. The Pequea Fire Company responded, but they quickly realized this wasn't going to be a simple rescue. Before we keep going, if you're enjoying the video so far, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe to the channel. That really helps me keep bringing you these kinds of stories. When the rescue team arrived and sized up the situation, they quickly realized the hexagonal shape of the tunnel brought a whole set of problems you almost never see in regular cave rescues. First, they had to squeeze through that keyhole entrance, dragging equipment through the narrow gap into the mine. Once inside, they still had to crawl about 150 feet just to reach the trapped group, all while working in an extremely cramped space. After checking their options, they settled on a pretty unusual plan. They brought in soap and water, hoping to lubricate the young man's torso. The idea was simple: cut down the friction between his body and the rock so he could compress himself just enough to slowly slide back out of the squeeze. For 2 straight hours, the rescue went on. The young man was wedged in that brutal spot the whole time while dozens of rescuers did everything they could to get him free. And the worst part? His friend stuck on the other side couldn't do a thing except wait and try to keep his buddy calm. Finally, after what felt like forever, the soap and water trick started paying off. Inch by inch, he slid backward through the narrow passage. When they finally emerged from cool caves after 2 hours in that underground nightmare, the second friend was treated for minor injuries, mostly scrapes and bruises from the rock walls and the rescue itself. Later, they learned that section had never been designed for people to pass through. The hexagonal corridor was originally meant for moving equipment with pulleys or conveyor belts. Luck was definitely on their side that day because all 3 of them walked away alive. If you've made it this far, I'm guessing you enjoyed the story. And if you did, you'll probably like the one that's popping up on your screen right now. Thanks so much for sticking around, and I'll see you in the next video.